Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. They are Daniel Gallen and Mark Brennan. Those two are fresh off the Penn State football practice field. Our last regular season look at Nittany Lions practice action. I am in New England for the holiday. Appreciate these guys for letting me hit the road a little bit early. I know Daniel's on the move for his Thanksgiving as well. Mark is hosting Thanksgiving, so he's interrupting his time prepping for that. But we wanted to bring this episode to you ahead of your holiday travel. It's going to be our second and only episode this week that you'll get before kickoff in Piscataway, 3:30 p.m. at SHI Stadium. The Penn State Nittany Lions, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights meet at 5 and 6 each, a chance to get bowl eligible for both of these programs. And Penn State looking to finish off its Big Ten schedule with 3 consecutive wins. We'll break down some of the keys to the matchup, storylines, players to watch, and ultimately give you our score predictions a little bit later here in the episode. But I'm going to lean on these guys a little bit because the first time I've missed a Penn State practice since, I can't tell you when. I've been at all of them with you guys throughout the course of 2025, the highs and the lows. And I'll kick it over to you first, Daniel. Practice observations. You took care of our notebook. It was a solo job this week without me there. And so why don't you give us the bullet points and what we need to be aware of that you witnessed, that you saw, what you maybe didn't see during your look on Wednesday?
I think the biggest thing is Chaz Coleman was back at practice. We know that's been a point of curiosity ever since he didn't play in the Indiana game. We know that he, after a quiet start to Big Ten play, where he hadn't really been playing that much at all. I think it was 12 combined snaps between Northwestern and Iowa. He had a nice game at Ohio State, and then we haven't seen him for the past 3 weeks. Hasn't been at practice. We did see him in sweats on the sideline at the Indiana game, but didn't see him last weekend. So if you're Penn State, that's a good sign. Terry Smith said that he's going to be a game time decision. That's a 3:30 p.m. kick on Saturday. So that's when we'll know. That availability report will come out at 1:30. Maybe that'll give us some insight based on what Terry Smith said today. Will probably be questionable. That would be my guess right now. And then we'll see if he's out there. In other notes, Owen Wafel was also back, defensive tackle, who was a little bit further down in that rotation on the interior, but still an important piece nonetheless. He was back at practice. He hasn't played since the Iowa game, I believe. And then in general, just didn't see Jackson Smolik again. So it looks like it'll be another week of Liam Clifford, QB2. And then at running back, Penn State ruled out 4 scholarship running backs, Martin, Smith, Coleman, and Hayes on Saturday before the Nebraska game. We saw Corey Smith warming up, doing some things. 3 of those guys were back at practice, Martin, Smith, and Hayes. We didn't see Jabri Coleman. So we'll see. I mean, depth running back hasn't really had to be an issue this year. Hasn't really been something that we've gone into Saturdays thinking about too much. But I think that's some clerical work on our end.
A little bit of a spoiler alert for later on in our predictions. There may be some RB3 mention in that conversation. So if that's a big tease for you guys, because there hasn't been much RB3 conversation at any point in Big Ten action so far. Good stuff from you, Daniel. You have a full story up on the Chaz Coleman situation over at Lions247.com here on Wednesday evening. As you mentioned, missed the last 3 games. The last we saw him on the field, he was making an impact against Ohio State. It's probably his biggest impact that we've seen in a Big Ten game thus far in his young career, with the pressure on a 3rd down at the goal line and also a scooping up a fumble, returning it into the red zone and setting up a Penn State touchdown. Mark, in terms of Terry Smith, this may be the last time we speak with him after a practice where he has that interim head coach label. We don't know. We don't know what awaits after this weekend. If we haven't reinforced that enough, there's so much uncertainty beyond 7 p.m. in Piscataway, New Jersey, about where this program is going to be. We might be at an introductory press conference for the next head coach within 48 hours of that, for all we know. But as things stand now, is another chance to hear from Terry. We've gotten him a couple times per week after getting him maybe a couple times per season for the last dozen years. And so, Mark, what were the biggest takeaways people should know about what you all asked and heard from Terry Smith tonight?
Yeah, before I get into that, Daniel, that had to be the greatest practice we ever saw, right? The greatest 1 in 6/8 periods of practice. Tyler, I think your bold prediction is in trouble because when we got there were, well, I don't want to ruin it. We'll ruin it I'll ruin it for you when you make your bold prediction. Just to follow up on one quick thing, after practice, we did see Jackson Smolik walking out with a pink cast on his hand. So looks like, again, as you noted, I mean, that's stupid. I was going to say breaking news, but that would have been a stupid joke. And I didn't even mean it that way. But not a revelation. I mean, I think we pretty much all figured that he was going to be done for at least the regular season. In terms of Terry Smith, he was asked about Rappleyea, and I forget who asked that, Daniel? You know?
I think it was Max.
Yeah. And he asked about what you guys have kind of in common, when Terry said earlier in the week that he's kind of like me, and Terry simply said, "We fight to the death." It's like, whoa. I mean, I don't think this guy's giving up. I don't think this team's giving up. I mean, I think this is, it was a pretty strong statement. And then we was asked a couple times to maybe talk about that and, where that came from. And obviously from his roots in the mean streets of Aliquippa and then moving over to Monroeville. But he talked about playing street football. And I had a pretty good feel for what street football was, but I asked him about it. And he's like, "You guys don't know." And I do, but I want to hear you say it, Terry, because you're going to describe it much better than I do. And he's like, you got bruises. You may have a bone sticking out. And he talked about how he was always the smallest guy, and he had to go up against his brother and older players. And boy, I'm just thinking this is like this season for him, right? I mean, this is the underdog who's succeeding against all odds, and he's getting through it with guile, with toughness, with all of these things. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, Daniel. I don't know, but his ability to speak from the heart and get these messages across, I just think it is outstanding. I have no idea what's exactly going to happen in the next week, but he has presented himself so well, and this was just another example of it. In terms of nuts and bolts, a lot of people are wondering why Penn State has lost all these commitments, and you look at an LSU or a Florida, and they really haven't. And he said that he could not put his finger on. So I asked him the question directly, and he said, just, it's a challenging time. It's an interim coach. Nothing he could really put his finger on. So that was another thing that stood out to me. And, beyond that, he was asked about Coleman, as Daniel mentioned, and I don't know that there was a whole lot of breaking news coming out of that. I think it was another one of these press conferences where you learned even a little bit more about Terry Smith as a person and his level of determination and toughness.
And it's worth noting, forgive me, Daniel, if you mentioned this and I missed it while you were saying it, but the last couple of weeks leading up to these games, Chaz Coleman was not at Wednesday practice during our viewing periods. And so just keep that in mind. Seems to be a step forward. And as we hear, but we'll figure that out in Piscataway. These guys will keep an eye on him in pregame warmups if he's out there, number 19, and how things may be trending along the way. But Mark referenced it there. Let's bring it back over to you, Daniel. In terms of Terry Smith, the guys in the spotlight, perhaps a lot more since Saturday night, and how post-game went and how things were on the field with the crowd and the players and the tone that he brought into that press conference. And we mentioned on Monday it was more of a toned down Terry Smith, more of the kind of more of the guy that we've been accustomed to hearing from, and kind of the way he addresses us. But this may be the last time, other than coming out of a game, where he's going to be asked about this and the job opportunity and interviewing with Pat Kraft. And I know these things came up, and it's our understanding that he did indeed interview with Pat Kraft this week. We don't have that locked in. We don't know exactly how things went. We hope to learn a little bit more as things go, and whether that matters or it won't in this coaching search. And maybe it'll matter for whether Terry Smith is here with another head coach. Those things will get figured out. But Daniel, how would you describe the way he handled that subject as it came up over the course of this interview session?
Yeah, Smith did get asked if he's met with Pat Kraft this week, and he didn't answer the question. He just
stiff arm.
Yeah, just pivoted it to talking about needing to beat Rutgers on Saturday. And I think that's carried over from what he was talking about on Monday, where all the questions came back to got to take care of business on Saturday. Need to beat Rutgers on Saturday. So, I think that in this situation tonight, like Mark said, it did feel like you got a little bit more insight into him as a person, into his approach to things, and why or how it might be resonating in the locker room. Definitely a more relaxed than when you're sitting up at that podium, sitting at the microphone with the cameras on you. But didn't really glean anything, I think, about what his future might look like after Saturday.
Oh, that'll be a topic of conversation for us. It is already over at our coaching search hot board, which tell you what, today went over 3,000 pages on that thread alone, over 5 million views. And if you haven't been a part of the conversation, it's getting a little bit late in the process, but you're still welcome to join us. We got a Black Friday special that has already launched, 75% off an annual subscription. It's a great time to get on board. Follow us through the tail end of our coverage of this coaching search. We've done our diligence as best we can, I think. And as we're bracing for a decision and a new name, join us for a new era of Penn State football. Whatever that looks like, the roster getting reconfigured a bit, the staff getting assembled, you're going to be able to stay ahead of the curve with us at Lions 24/7. And as I said, because of this Black Friday special that we've got going on, 75% off, not just for your first month, but in through most of next season, essentially through next November if you're signing on board now. So think about it, consider it. If you're already with us, thank you so much for being a VIP subscriber. Guys, players were also available today. Mark, we'll begin with you. Who were you kind of perched up with, and what could you pass along from that?
Yeah, Kobe Howard making his first appearance, I believe, as the true freshman. And, well, he's got a sparkle in his eye, and, he really carries himself extremely well. Having said that, he was very reluctant to make too much of himself not playing, and he fessed up that he just was not a good enough blocker. And as people asked over and over about him not playing early, he just said, I wasn't blocking well enough. I had to learn to block, and it was block. No
special teams, Mark? No special teams?
They got it through. You know what he didn't mention, though? And I've been on it all year. Special teams. Yeah. Which, I still, for people who may be watching this pod with me on it for the first time this year, James Franklin said early in the season, maybe even it was early in the season, that the reason Kobe Howard wasn't playing because he wasn't doing well enough on special teams. And I don't know why I just get such a kick out of that. He could have just said he wasn't blocking well enough, right? Which would have been...
I think it was right before kickoff when he was going through his green light list, and he mentioned Howard as a guy who was on the bubble, and he said, we just want to see him maybe be ready to contribute more on special teams before he pass him along the green light. Lo and behold, he played 22 snaps in the first game, a few along the way in non-conference play. We didn't see him again, essentially, until James Franklin was fired, and that was that.
Yeah, well, and I tried to ask that question. Did you see a correlation between the coaching change and you playing? He said, not really. It was more about blocking. He did say how much he loved James Franklin, said how much he loves Terry Smith. He was asked about where he has to get better blocking, just to keep improving in that area. And I said, well, what does somebody said, what does the future hold for you at your position, whatever. And I said, well, what does the future hold for you personally? And focused on Rutgers. So really handled himself. And I'm not making fun of him. He did a great job. He was really good. So I don't think anybody was really trying to bait him, but we're asking honest questions, and he was answering to the best that he could. And if he's here next year, he's going to be a fun guy to interview. If he's not, wherever he is, he's going to be a fun guy to interview and a fun guy to watch play. So we'll get some video up of him, and you can catch a little bit of his personality. Tyler, I know you knew about it, and Daniel, I'm assuming you saw him coming through high school and whatnot, and the way he kind of carried himself, and people have seen what he's been on social media before he got here. So good kid, and was fun to talk to him for the first time. Handled himself really well.
30-plus yard catch last Saturday against Nebraska in 4 of the 5 last games as he started to come on and emerge as a piece of the offensive plan. At least a 14-yard grab, 3 of them 20-plus yards, and he started the last 2 games. He has ranked 4th in receiver snaps each of the last 2 games, but he's part of the first 11 that trotted out from the sideline. And Terry Smith told us a couple weeks ago in kind of giving an updated evaluation of Kobe Howard that he's been a pleasant surprise as a blocker as he's gotten those chances to contribute in the run game during these matchups. And Daniel, I should note we've been on this freshman, release the freshman conversation from a media angle. That's now 5 interviews with true freshmen in the last 11 days. 2 of them with Darius Dixon. One was after the Michigan State matchup. We also got him earlier this week on a Zoom. Last week we had Alex Tash and we had Yvonne Kamaju after practice. And then today with Kobe Howard. So 0 interviews with any true freshman across 11 and a half seasons with James Franklin. 5 of them across the last 11 days. I've mentioned in the past, the only time we got freshmen during the James Franklin era in media sessions was when it was a mandated open locker room situation at a New Year's Six Bowl or in the playoff last year. Daniel, who did you speak with today? You're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, from a new kid on the block to a guy who's talking about maybe playing a seventh college football season.
Yeah, to close the book on Kobe Howard, it's funny to hear him say that blocking was the reason why he wasn't on the field, because I brought this up last week where, I pulled it up, and through the first 5 games that he played, it was a pretty 50-50 split on whether he was on the field for run plays, pass plays. And then against Michigan State, 19 run blocking snaps to 7 pass blocking snaps. And then last week, 13 run blocking snaps to 14 pass plays. Because I think when he made that big catch last week, I think I was about to say, oh, this is probably a run because Kobe Howard's on the field right now. But yeah, tonight I spent some time with Zariah Fisher and Alonzo Ford. I know that we've talked about Zariah Fisher's story before. And Terry Smith talked about it a little bit, where, the injuries, his mom passing, just the true, I think Terry Smith called it true adversity that he faced while here at Penn State. And I asked him, because of those injuries, and I prefaced it by saying, eligibility it's all fungible now. No one really knows how it works. So I asked him if he has any time left, and he says he will have the option for a 7th year. He's not sure if he wants to use it. I asked him what the pros and cons were. He said the pros were obviously more football at Penn State. The cons being a 7th year college student. It was something that, he didn't sound too enamored with. And that's something that I've heard in the past from guys who don't use their full allotment of eligibility, that sometimes it's time to move on. But it was a very nice conversation with him, sort of, reflecting a little bit, looking back. I also caught up with Alonzo Ford. He's someone else that has dealt with some injuries. He said that he and Zariah Fisher were kind of, joking about being 60-year college students together, and, everything that has gone into that. Ford has also had injury issues. He said that he doesn't have any eligibility remaining, but both Ford and Fisher said that if Penn State does make a bowl game, both of them plan to play. And Fisher echoed, similar to what Terry Smith said about, they expect a lot of people to play. There will be a couple separate cases for why guys might not. I feel like it would probably be more than a few based on some of the outlooks for the upperclassmen on this roster. But it was some good perspective to get. I think that this week of the year, whenever you get the chance to talk to some of these veterans, like, there's something about it where not only is it the last game of the year, it's Thanksgiving, so it's a holiday week. That changes the tone. There's fewer of us there. I think it just makes for a kind of a neat environment to get some of these older guys looking back, being honest or reflecting on things a little bit. So I'll have some more on Fisher and Ford on the boards later tonight and later this week.
Emotions start to ramp up right now. I mean, that big hourglass of sand that seemed so full a few years back when these guys are freshmen, more than a few years in the case of these two linemen, but all of a sudden it's dwindled down to your last game. Hopefully you get a 13th if you can beat Rutgers, and then that's it. And you've got zero football promise beyond that. But as you said, the door is open if Zariah Fisher decides to utilize that. Maybe come back to this team, explore a 7th year at the college football level. It's a rare thing, but it is in play right now. And he is second on this team, according to Pro Football Focus, in total pressures on the season, 28 of them through 11 games. That trails only denied Dennis Sutton, fellow starting defensive end. And Alonzo Ford started 10 of 11 games to this point. But if you watch the game flow and you kind of see the snap counts, it's really been Xavier Gilliam who's been more prominent as their number 2 defensive tackle next to Zane Durant. Gilliam's a redshirt freshman, one of the key figures perhaps for roster retention, but Alonzo Ford has been locked in as a top 3 defensive tackle for this squad. Let's shift our focus towards Saturday afternoon in Piscataway. It's a matchup where both teams are trying to finish the regular season at 6-6. In Penn State's case, it would be a 3-game win streak. Rutgers is coming off a 42-9 loss at Ohio State. They've been very up and down this season. Had a couple teams, Minnesota, Iowa, on the ropes. Didn't get that game done. So now for them, postseason eligibility comes down to beating what is suddenly a Penn State team that has some momentum on its side. And when you try to find the edges for Penn State, Of course, it's obvious that they have more talent, quote unquote talent, when you look at the recruiting and transfer portal pickups versus what Rutgers has in the field. But there is a clear mismatch as far as we can tell, Mark, when you look at Penn State's rush attack, which is really rolling right now, versus Rutgers' run defense, which has been quite porous to this point.
Yeah, I dug up some stats when doing my prediction, and Rutgers is last in the Big Ten in rushing yards allowed per game, but it's also allowing 6.57 yards per carry, which is last in the nation. That is a gigantic number. I mean, that is huge, and it goes even above that, up to close to 7 yards in Big Ten play only. So I was like, whoa. I mean, that is like incredibly, incredibly bad. And I think for Penn State, I had mentioned it earlier that this team was basically training at altitude when it was going through that string of at Iowa, at Ohio State, and then against Indiana. And now you're getting 3 straight teams. You had 2 that are lower tier run defenses in Michigan State and Nebraska. And now you're getting one that, like, I just wanted to see where Rutgers kind of lined up against everybody else, and it's even worse. So to me, it's a matter of, is Kotelnicki going to use common sense and keep doing what you're doing? You would like to give them the benefit of the doubt and said it's worked for a game and a half now, that they're going to keep doing it. But if they do that, I mean, there's going to be a lot of yards gained the way that this offensive line is playing, the way that the 2 running backs are playing, and the way that the passing game is keeping opposing defenses honest. So this should be a really, really good matchup for Penn State, and it should be a good opportunity for Katron Allen and Nick Singleton.
You've got a head coach in Terry Smith that has repeatedly told us during recent weeks that this is their identity now. This is how they want to beat opponents. They want to wear them down in the trenches, get the ball to these running backs 30 to 40 times or more in the game, and just break your spirit and win the game that way and make things a little bit easier perhaps for the young quarterback and Ethan Grunkier. And you brought it up, 202 yards allowed on the ground per game for Rutgers through 11 matchups. And they're also second to last in the Big Ten in points allowed per game, nearly 32 points surrendered on average. And Daniel, could be another special game for this duo that we've talked so much about, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And it really feels like they are feeding off of each other in a way that we had waited a long time to see this season. It's been Katron Allen being Mr. Steady going back to August 31st in the season opener. Now Nick Singleton's starting to turn on the Jets. The last couple times they played games in Beaver Stadium, some big gainers as a receiver, as a rusher. And you look at where he is now in Penn State history, tied with Saquon Barkley for the most total touchdowns in their careers, 53 apiece. So one trip to the end zone in Piscataway will get it done and place him above everybody else in terms of reaching the end zone in a Nittany Lions uniform. And meanwhile, you look at Katron Allen, he already has the career rushing record at Penn State, got that done with a 160-yard performance last Saturday night against Nebraska. He's 46 yards shy of 4,000 career yards. Obviously, he would be the only Penn State player to achieve that, but he would be only the 23rd player in Big Ten history going back to 1956 to reach 4,000 career marks. And I'd be curious to go through that list and see how many of them shared a backfield throughout their college football career like Katron did. It's our last chance to potentially see them. I don't know what their outlook's going to look like. How much will we see them in a bowl game? Would they both definitely play in a bowl game? I think that's one of the more compelling questions about what happens if they get that 13th matchup. But the final chance here against a defense that's ripe for the picking, some more historical opportunities for these guys. What do you make of the opportunity for them to finish out their Big Ten careers in style?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a prime opportunity to do some big things against Rutgers, given how that Scarlet Knights defense is played, and also what Terry Smith has said about this is the identity, this is what Penn State wants to do. I think that last week, I mean, you really saw them lean on Nebraska and really have their way with them up front. I think that it's going to be a prime opportunity for a couple big games and some more history. I think it's pretty neat. I mean, when these guys came in, and we heard from the jump about how talented they were, how well that they would play off of each other. I know that we've talked about it in the past. There were a lot of questions about, all right, it's 2022. I don't really necessarily think that we all thought we'd be here in November 2025, and they would both still be here and both be producing at a historic level. So they got one more chance to do it. It's just going to be exciting. I think that there's a lot of seniors on this team that, Penn State fans have gone wire to wire with. But it's a little bit different when it's a running back because they touch the ball so often, because they are so front and center. And so I think it might feel a little bit different watching these two guys for the last time than maybe, some of the guys on the defensive side of the ball. So if you're a Penn State fan, I mean, sit back. It seems like they're going to get plenty of opportunities to make some stuff happen. And based on how they've been playing and based on this Rutgers defense, I think they're going to have some success.
And of course, finding balance off of that ground game is Ethan Grunkier at quarterback, coming off an 11 for 12 performance. That's 92% completion. Upon further review, and thanks to some notes from the media team over at Penn State football, learned that's the first time that a quarterback for Penn State has attempted 10 or more passes and finished above 90% since 1981, when Todd Blackledge was 10 of 11 at Syracuse. And so you love the way that they're finding this kind of comfort level for the young quarterback. And we talked to him earlier this week on Tuesday, and he agreed with Terry Smith where he feels like he's taken some significant strides in recent weeks as the quarterback. They're taking more shots down the field. 5 throws that were of 20-plus yards, completions. Only one of them was a short pass to Nick Singleton, who went 50 with it. The rest were Grunkier looking downfield, assessing the situation, and finding a guy, and they were all to 4 different players on those completions. And, Mark, this is kind of the closing statement for Ethan Grunkier in the regular season in Big Ten football. He will have started the entire second half of the season, the last 6 games since Drew Aller's season-ending injury back in mid-October. And what are you most curious to see from Grunk?
I wonder how he's going to handle the hostile atmosphere. I wonder, after, he made it through at Iowa and he made it through at Ohio State. So I wonder what this hostile atmosphere at SHI Stadium.
Thanksgiving Saturday in Piscataway. I've lived it. There's a lot of things I loved about it, but hostility was not among the reasons that it's not a thing. You're right.
How about stacking games? Okay. I think we've seen him get progressively better. And in all seriousness, he did a great job of handling those tough atmospheres. So that's not going to be an issue. But I think the key is, okay, you had one really good game. And I'm not saying to complete 90% of your passes, but stack another game like that. Limit the turnovers. Try to have you're always trying not to have turnovers, but focus on not turning the ball over and just doing what you did. Look downfield. Now he's going to need an assist from his offensive coordinator with that. And again, I keep going back to it. I think if they do that, if they call the plays that way, it's going to work out well for him. But to me, just keep doing what you're doing. He's emerged as a really good leader in that huddle. People are looking to him, and he's doing a really nice job. So I think stacking games, and I'll foreshadow a little bit, maybe expand a little bit on my player to watch.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about Ethan earlier in the week with our episode on Monday coming out of Terry Smith's press conference in Beaver Stadium. It was kind of a key component of our conversation there. Let's talk about Penn State's defense, looking how it looks against this offense. And let's face it, Rutgers and Penn State, there's been kind of some sleepy performances from Penn State during this Big Ten series. I remember even when they had Saquon Barkley, we got the halftime or the third quarter of some of these matchups, and it was like, Penn State going to turn on the Jets here? But it hasn't really mattered because Rutgers has not been able to muster points. If you remember the very first Big Ten game ever for Rutgers, and I certainly remember it, but also the very first Big Ten game ever for James Franklin in 2014, September of 2014, they got together in that stadium in Piscataway, and Penn State was on the ropes. Christian Hackenberg ends up being able to lead a touchdown drive late. It's a 13-10 victory for Penn State. And simply put, Rutgers has not challenged Penn State like that again. And there have been 10 total matchups between these teams as Big Ten foes. Rutgers has not scored more than those 10 points in these matchups. Here's the list of points they've scored, starting with 2014 and working through the last time these teams met. 10, 3, 0, 6, 7, 6, 7, 0, 10, 6. And so you match that with what we've seen from the Penn State defense lately, Daniel, clearly playing the best ball of the season so far, seemingly finding something under Jim Knowles, whether that's a simplification, but whatever it is, it's working. Younger players are involved. Veteran players are playing the best ball that they have so far. And I'll remind you both that Rutgers on the season has surrendered 35 sacks. And just for comparison's sake, so people can realize what that might look like if you're watching this team on a game-to-game basis, Penn State has surrendered 16 sacks. So less than half of that total. It's a lot of quarterback hits. Daniel, again, doesn't this seem like a significant edge based on where these teams come into the game?
Yeah, we'll come back to that sack stat when we talk about my bold prediction a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, I think this Penn State defense is playing at a really high level. And yeah, when I was putting my prediction down for this game, that 10-point threshold popped up in my head again. And I had to be like, well, is this the Rutgers offense that can score more than 10 points against Penn State? It might be, but they only scored 9 points against the Ohio State last weekend. So how sure are we? But yeah, I think that you've seen this Penn State defense. We've heard a lot about some of the simplification that was going on that has allowed guys like Alex Tash to get onto the field. We've seen, I think, just the overall trust in putting someone like Darius Dixon out there on an island in some big spots, and he has held up as a true freshman. And then I think that you've just seen the little tweaks that have been made. I still think that the details that we got about how the packages that they're using, where like at safety next to Zachy Wheatley, where depending on what package they're in, that dictates what safety is out there for what role. I think that that's good coaching. Maybe it took a little bit too long to get to that point, but I think that these guys are playing fast right now. They're playing physical. They're flying around. And we've seen it these past 2 weeks where they give up the 57-yard touchdown against Michigan State. They give up the 52-yard run against Nebraska, and it didn't seem like it affected them. That, against Nebraska, they buckled down, got the stop. Against Michigan State, they buckled down and did not let the Spartans do anything else the rest of that game. I think that too is a little bit of an insight into the mindset where they've had things go wrong and it hasn't been the end of the world. I think that that's something that we've talked about in a lot of different aspects of this team in terms of how they've responded to things, but that really stands out with the defense.
Yeah, just 10 points allowed in each of the last couple games. Had a pretty strong second half against Indiana. That last drive obviously tarnished some things by the Hoosiers, but a really strong stretch right now. Mark, Daniel, let's get into our players to watch before we serve up our score and bold predictions. And Daniel, we're going right back to you. Who is your Penn State player to watch?
I've got cornerback AJ Harris. He's someone that we talked about coming into this year, potential first-round pick, breaking the drought. He got benched against Northwestern, missed a game with an injury, has been pretty quiet. And sometimes that's because guys weren't throwing at him. I think other times it was we weren't seeing any splash plays. We weren't seeing the PBUs that you would come to expect. I think this Rutgers passing game presents some interesting challenges. Might be the most interesting Rutgers passing game since Leonte Carew was there. If you want to remember a Scarlet Knight, I double checked the stat because I'd seen it in the offseason. But last year, Ethan Kaliak-Manis threw for 2,600 yards. They hadn't had someone throw for 2,000 yards since 2015. They almost went a decade without someone hitting that mark, when in college football, like 2,000-yard passers these days, I mean, that's easy. Like, could put Mark back there and he could get to 2K pretty easily in some of these offenses. And so I think that Rutgers revamped that wide receiver core. You got KJ Duff, Ian Strong, DT Sheffield. I think that's going to be it can be a potentially fun challenge on the back end for AJ Harris, for Audavian Collins, for Zion Tracy, Darius Dixon, Kenny Woosley. You pick your favorite defensive back. They might have a nice challenge out there. But I think on the outside, that's where Duff and Strong are going to be. I think that Harris can, change some minds, boost that stock, put some good things on tape on Saturday.
Duff has become a dude for them. I mean, he's just about 1,000 yards on the season. We saw him a bunch. I mean, he was a guy who was seemingly begging for a Penn State offer for a while there. He was coming to a bunch of prospect camps, kind of a tweener between tight end, wide receiver. Where does he fit in at the next level? He has found a fit here in the Big Ten, and he is going to be a matchup to watch there for these Penn State defensive backs and AJ Harris. Mark, where do you put the spotlight?
I'd be more of a tight end. I mean, I'm similar in size to all these guys, right? I just like maybe carry it a little differently. If you know what I mean. I always used to kid that I was the same dimensions as LeVar Arrington, 6'4" and 230. And but he carried it a little bit better when he was back at Penn State. But I am going to go with a tight end. I'm going to go to tight end position in general and at one tight end in particular. We've been hearing so much about Rappleyea. And I think he's really sinking his teeth into the end of this season and having fun. And, we saw him score a touchdown last week. I think one of the natural progressions of this offense would be to get the tight ends more involved. They went to them against Indiana when they had to kind of scramble back. And to me, I think there could be more of a comfort level there with Grunk. So when I was talking about stacking games, I think that's the one area where, hey, maybe get these guys a little bit more involved. You know that Rutgers knows what's coming at them from the ground game, and they're probably going to try to have some answers for the passing game, but we just haven't seen the production from the tight ends that we thought we would see throughout the season. And I think, better late than never. And Grunk, to me, I think we'll be able to use this, regardless of the bowl, as a stepping stone to next season. I've said hopefully it's here for him because I love covering the guy, but wherever he is, I think the future is very, very bright. It took him a little bit this year. I think he was 100%, but I think it took him a little bit to get comfortable. And now you're seeing that he is comfortable coming back from that injury. And I think he has a chance to do some really good things in this game and some special things in his future.
I think his impact as a run blocker has been more apparent, especially because he's so demonstrative after some of those blocks. But he is a really impressive route runner when he gets rolling. And we haven't seen a lot of that opportunity for him to get vertical or to intermediate levels of the pass game so far. First career touchdown last week. That's a step in the right direction. I think he's still a guy that can do a lot of damage as a balanced tight end. And I'd still kind of like my Pat Freiermuth comparison that I had for him coming to campus. By the time Pat was a year 3 guy, he was off to the NFL. Everybody has their own progress, but I think Rappleyea on the field, off the field, going to be important. And just to note, since you talked about the tight end room at large, keep an eye on Luke Reynolds. He only played 15 snaps last Saturday. I think he was at like 30-plus snaps essentially every other Big Ten game. Where is he right now? He had a punt return run for 26 yards, but he's a guy that we have high hopes for, finishing out his second year on campus. That tight end room is going to be interesting. Khalil Dinkins moving on after this year as a fifth-year senior. My player to watch, I'm going to go with King Mack at the safety spot. We've had a lot of conversation about Denai Dennis Sutton and the way he's kind of ascended here late in the season. 4 sacks in the last 3 games after no sacks in the first 5 games. Zane Durant, someone else who is playing really strong football. But those guys are seniors. So while you love seeing them take these steps forward, it's also, that's it. Like they're building their draft stock. It's good for you right now. King Mack, to me, is somebody that you want to keep taking steps into the offseason. Because if he's here next year, I think he could be a really big component of the locker room. I think we've talked about it on this podcast. He's got a big-time personality, very much accountable, professional kind of approach, but also a lighthearted guy in a lot of ways. But what we're seeing on the field right now has been his best stretch of football at the college level, and he's also played a bunch of football. There was a time this season where he was kind of teetering. Is he a starter? Is he the number 3 safety? Is he maybe the number 4 safety? Right now, he is solidly the next guy at safety beyond Zacchae Wheatley, who essentially never leaves the field, but will be leaving campus in a matter of a game or 2. And so to me, King Mack, coming off a career-high 7 tackles, guy who had a fantastic closing speed interception against Indiana along the sidelines, played really at a high level against Michigan State. I'd love to see that continue and close out the regular season because I wasn't convinced he was like a long-term defensive solution in your starting lineup at midseason. I'm starting to really sense that he can be a guy that we go into next year if he's here and you put him in with Penn in that starting lineup for game 1 and you kind of see where he can take it as a senior, former top 100 overall prospect from the South Florida powerhouse, and just really excited to see where he's been trending lately. So he's my player to watch. Let's get into our score predictions and bold predictions to wrap up this episode. And Mark, this time we begin with you.
Yeah, my score prediction, I'm going 28-10 Penn State. I'm not going to go back over everything I talked about with the rushing game, and because I think that's, we've already kind of hashed that out. But I think defensively, you're looking at a really good running back for Rutgers, and you're looking at a statue of a quarterback. Now, I say a veteran, wily statue of a quarterback, but I just don't know that having somebody who doesn't move that well is going to work against a defense that is playing as aggressively as Penn State's defense is. So let's see if he proves me wrong, but I just think it's, you touched on it. I think it's going to be tough for them to score a whole lot of points, and I think Penn State will get things rolling. My bold prediction, this may not seem so bold, but it was more something that stood out to me that I was surprised. Katron Allen needs 123 yards to get to 1,200 on the season, which would mean he's averaging 100 yards per game. And now what happens after that? There's so many ifs involved. If they go to a bowl, if he plays, whatever. But Penn State has not had a running back average 100 in a season since Saquon Barkley in 2016. He was at 106.9. He didn't even do it his final year. And you think about Miles Sanders, you think about Journey Brown, you think about Kevon Lee. Sorry, I didn't want to get into Kevon Lee. He really wasn't going to get there. But they've had some really good running backs. And it's kind of surprising to me, but I also think it's a function of, with these guys the last 4 years, they have both been there. And it will be amazing. When Franklin retired, he was averaging 77. Katron was averaging 77.8 yards per carry.
That's the nicest thing I've ever heard. A phrase after James Franklin in mid-October. Retired.
Retired, yeah. Excuse me. Well, he did kind of retired. Yeah, that was a Freudian slip. I'm trying to read my notes as I'm doing it. When James Franklin was fired, fortunately, I wrote that. But the point being, 77.8 yards per carry. So to come up that many yards over the course of 5 games, and then it would be 6 to get there, I think would be something that would be bold that we never would have thought it would have happened. Mm-hmm. Now, will it be bold for him to rush for 123 against Rutgers? Maybe not. But it would be ultimately bold if we went back and reclassified James as being retired as opposed to fired. So thanks for calling me out. I'm glad we didn't let that go. I'd rather acknowledge my stupidity than let it float.
He may need to retire from determining running back rotations if he was the guy putting the clamp on that situation.
That's what I meant. That's what I was getting at.
He told us it was the coordinator, but all I know is that with James Franklin, Katron was getting 12 carries per game. Without James Franklin, he's getting 23 carries per game. The results have been there. Daniel, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I teased it a little bit earlier, that Rutgers defensive or offensive line. I think Denai Dennis-Sutton is going to go out in style for his Penn State regular season career. Like you said, 4 sacks in the last 3 games, has been playing like a menace, seems to have unlocked something. It seems like whatever Terry Smith told them about being quitters got through to him, and he is not quitting. I think that Denai Dennis-Sutton is going to set a new career high with 2.5 sacks of Ethan Kaliak-Manis. Tyler, I was tempted to go through and read all those Rutgers leading passers in the document that I had up with all their passing stats. But
as someone who's well versed in the subject, don't do that to yourself.
We'd have to mark this podcast as not safe for work if we did that. But I'm going back to with a big defensive performance, I think that Rutgers does not get past the 10-point threshold again. I think we got Penn State 31, Rutgers 10. Maybe it's like some of these other Penn State Rutgers games that we've seen where, it's like 10-7 at the end of the first quarter. Things, are maybe, in flux. Maybe Rutgers hits on a big pass play to one of those wide receivers early. But I think, using Singleton and Allen, Penn State just really dictates the terms of this yet again.
It took us long enough, Daniel, but we finally did it. We did it like 7 games last year, but I also have the same score as you. Penn State winning 31-10, which would be 3 consecutive blowout margins to close out this season, and to get back to 6-6 from 3-6. And I won't dally too long in this because it kind of goes back to what we said: the combination of Penn State's ground game, the momentum they have as an offensive front, the momentum they have as a running back spot, and the balance they have. They got a quarterback who may be young, but he's not turning the ball over. And so I like that combination against a Rutgers defense that has really struggled to prevent teams from extending drives via the ground, from running the ball down their throat. And if Penn State gets the lead here, then they can put it away with that ground game in the second half, sort of like they did against Michigan State if it comes down to that. And then defensively, I just like their ability to get Rutgers in not manageable third down situations, which can lead to more pressure. And I just have a lot of mistrust for Rutgers right now in terms of a team that's going to play 4 complete quarters. And all of a sudden, I have trust that Penn State can do that. I did not think I would have that level of trust in a Penn State team. And not in a million years, if you told me that Penn State would be 5-6 going to Piscataway on Thanksgiving weekend, that I would define them as a motivated team. But here we are. And that's what I see. I see a motivated 5-6 Penn State team going to Piscataway. So give them credit for that. And I think that shows up on the field 31-10. I'll give you my bold prediction. Then I'm curious to hear from Mark why he thinks it may not work out for me. This is going to not sound so bold, but it will be. For the first time in 2025 Big Ten action, game number 9, a running back not named Katron Allen or Nick Singleton will handle a carry. Anybody not named Nick Singleton or Katron Allen doesn't even need to be a scholarship guy. It could be Tyler Holsworth. It could be Corey Smith, who is a scholarship guy. Somebody not named those two guys, and I'm not including Liam Clifford in the conversation here either, is going to get at least a carry in this game, something we have not seen through 8 conference matchups. Mark, why am I maybe in peril with that pick?
We go into practice, and there were 2 running backs working with Stan Drayton, and guess what their names were? Katron and Nick. So all the rest of them were either with special teams or doing foreign team stuff or whatever. And then, Daniel, explain the rest of the story. So I want to incorporate you into this.
Yeah, so the other running backs were over with Liam Clifford, doing handoffs with him, and then when we're in Haluba Hall, and so we're right there. We have a front row seat for the individual drills, especially with the running backs. And Stan Drayton had them doing some, I guess you'd call it blocking work. They're going up, they're hitting pads, running towards where blockers would be coming from. Everyone's doing the drills except Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. They're off to the side. They're watching. They're not getting put through the paces. I think that we know what they're all about, and they probably know what they're going to have to do on Saturday.
And if you watch the video I posted, you'll see Nick and Katron going through, and then you'll hear Drayton say, "You're done." So I don't know, Tyler. I mean, it's going to have to be quite the blowout, I think, for somebody else to kind of climb up there. I also wanted to give a shout out to Lines 247's favorite Rutgers fan. And I think we all know who that is.
It's not me, folks. It's just to make sure that's very clear, but I live with her.
Yes. And God bless her, because she is as passionate a Rutgers fan as you're going to have. And I have a level of respect for that, knowing people who have loved Penn State basketball for years and years and years. So, that's somebody who's going to be into this game probably as much as anybody this week.
Yeah, she had real trash to talk after that Maryland game a couple weeks ago. So I've seen it firsthand.
If you think you cursed at your TV a lot during the UCLA matchup 6-7 weeks ago, folks, stay tuned for what my wife will bring to the television set if things go bad for Rutgers this Saturday. But we'll leave that to her. Shout out to Hillary. Mark, you brought it into the conversation. I think that's hilarious. We'll get into whatever happens on Saturday in a post-game podcast. Daniel will join me from Piscataway. These guys will be in the stadium early before kickoff, and we'll see where things are with the coaching search. I have a feeling that by the time we get to Saturday evening, have that conversation, we may be starting to have a strong impression of where this lands. We currently, our read on this is that, this time next week, we're going to know the identity of the head coach. If we had to kind of bet on that at this point, I'm sure that's a relief for many of you, but that's where it's trending right now. And so stay with us at Lions247.com. That coaching search thread continues to crank out tons of pages, tons of comments. Insiders are popping up left and right. Some that we haven't seen in years are showing up to converse with us now, which is awesome. So look, topics of conversation include Kalen DeBoer, Marcus Freeman, Terry Smith, Bob Chesney from JMU. It's a long list of names, but it's starting to get a little bit short in terms of who's really getting discussed seriously right now over at that thread. So stay with us there through the game. Wishing everyone a great Thanksgiving. Wishing you both an enjoyable holiday before you guys head over to Piscataway, and then we'll touch base on Saturday. Appreciate you both. The regular season has ended. What a journey it has been, and we'll see how Game 12 goes for Penn State against Rutgers. For now, saying goodbye on behalf of Mark Brennan and Daniel Gallen. Happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for listening or watching the Lions 24/7 podcast.